Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Tom Springer. Tom is the host of the YouTube channel Stuff I Never Learned from a Schoolbook. His intention for starting his channel was to provide a space for sensitive or intuitive people to learn more, meet others who are awakening to their unique gifts, as well as meet people who can help guide them further along their journey. Tom first learned of his own intuitive abilities at the age of 49 when he was out on his first paranormal investigation with friends. His abilities have manifested into many different areas, such as being able to interact with elementals, talking with beings from other dimensions, and healing others through touch and energy bursting. Welcome, Tom. I am super excited to have you on the show today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So today we're going to talk about awakening to our intuitive abilities, finding the magic in the matrix. So basically just finding the magic in our mundane, finding the magic in our everyday life. So Tom, I had first heard of you through our mutual friend, Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress. And the night that you were actually on her show live was the same night I had done a podcast myself on walk-ins and spiritual awakening, kind of the correlation between that.
Right.
So Jess had actually seen my show the next day and said, you need to talk to my guest, Tom. You need to reach out to him because he's had a very similar experience. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit about you sharing your experience on when you started to realize that you have these abilities.
Sure, no problem. So, as you stated in the reading, I have only recently learned about this. I'm 50 now, so I learned about it about a year ago, and it was very surprising to say the least. I know a couple of friends who actually do paranormal investigations, are part of a team, and they asked me to come along as just a guest to see what they do and everything else. So I went to my first investigation over in Iowa, and we're sitting there, and the very first day, probably about 2 hours into it, we finished setting up, and we're kind of deciding where we're going to go and everything else throughout the place. And I see this lady walk in, and she starts talking to me, and I start talking back to her. We have two other mediums with us, and two other, they're both psychics and mediums, and they were both like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, that lady right there. And they're like, and one of them was like, you see a lady? And I'm like, yeah, she's standing right there. I go, I know she's a spirit. I can tell she's a spirit. And they're like, you're not rattled by this. Like, no, not really. So that kind of threw them off at first, that I was very nonchalant about it. And they were like, how can you hear her? And I'm like, with my ears? I mean, I didn't understand, what was really what the question was. And she's like, but we can hear her because she's a spirit. Why can you? And I'm like, I don't know. It's the first time I've ever done it. And so at that point is when we realized that I actually have abilities. And so we started playing with it throughout the whole investigation to see, what can you do? What is going on that you can do? And it was interesting because when I first got my abilities, they hit me like, as I tell people, they hit me like I was drinking from a fire hose, because they just flooded in. And it was not just, oh, you're a psychic. Oh, you're a medium. They were like, nope, you're a psychic, you're a medium, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. Like, oh goodness, hold on.
I can totally feel for you, because that's what happened to me too.
Do I need a pen and paper for this? Hold on a second. Is there lessons? What's going on here? So, so throughout the investigation, they would ask me questions and I would give answers, and they were like, yeah, that's what we're picking up too. So it was nice because they were confirming what I was feeling, or what I was seeing, or what I was hearing. And so that was the beginning of it. And that, like I said, that was pretty basic, but I continued to go on investigations with them for about another year. And very early on, we realized that I had more than just a psychic and mediumship ability. And they were really confused when I was talking to a lady that none of them could feel or hear or anything else. And they were like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, well, her name's Mary. And I described her. And they were like, what? And they're like, and I go, well, it's weird because when I'm talking to spirit, well, into what we would consider this realm, this world, I feel them in my head. But this one I was feeling across my shoulders.
Oh.
And she told me, she goes, they can't hear me because I'm not in your dimension. I was like, oh, interesting. So now
I just learned what that's called. It's called a frequency gap is
It
what
is.
that is called.
And so I found out at that point that I can hear people in other dimensions, and I can see them, they can hear me and see me and everything else. So it was very interesting to walk into that and have this happen too. So yeah, so it was really interesting to first understand what was going on, but I think I took everyone back by just how nonchalant. I was like, okay, cool, I got abilities. They were like, the first time I had this, and I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. So
that's funny because I think, you know, my first experiences, mine as a child, I was able to communicate with animals very easily. I mean, it was just normal to me. But then I went to school and told my schoolmates, and then they picked on me. And then I kind of feel like I shut that ability off as a child. But later on in my life, I started to work around the dead, the deceased.
right.
And so I spent a lot of time around people who were passing or who had passed over, or I was spending a lot of time in morgues, medical examiners' offices, all this stuff. So I started to myself hear the dead and see the dead. And, you know, all these things started to take place for me. And my sister was really heavily at this time into the paranormal. So we lived in Florida. And so she would drag me to St. Augustine all the time because that's a fun place to go investigate, right? So, but nothing would happen to her. It would always happen to me. You know, it was like they'd pull my hair, they'd push me, or they untie my shoe. Or I wanted nothing to do with it because I was dealing with the dead all day long for my job, you know, and then here I'm being dragged on the weekends to go deal with more, you know, deceased earthbound spirits. And so, you know, and then I started to realize they would attach to us sometimes when we would leave, they'd come home with me. And, you know, so I got to a point where I just was like, I don't want this anymore. And I shut it off. Like I literally sat down, wrote down a note and said, I don't want this. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I want to do this. It literally shut off for like 5 years, probably.
Wow.
And then I went through what I consider to be a walk-in or a drop-in, which I've heard you talk about before, where I completely changed. It was like one night I went to bed, it was my birthday, and then I woke up the next day and I was a totally different person. And I had different abilities. I had the telekinesis, I had the telepathy, I had, you know, these abilities that I could do a little, but then as I started to really work with them, I noticed they got stronger. Psychometry is where when you touch an object, you can read stuff off of it. I'm really good at that. And I did not recognize, but when I'd go into thrift stores or, you know, Salvation Army or anything like that, all my spidey senses were going crazy, and I would get itchy. My throat would close up, all these crazy things. And I now know it was psychometry. So when you first, you know, realized that you had these abilities, you know, I know that you would talk to some ladies who thought that you had a drop-in. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
So sure. It's really interesting because I have never heard of a drop-in or a walk-in or anything else. And like I said, my ability showed up a year ago, roughly a year ago. January, it'll be just about a year. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was at an Omaha, Nebraska Mystic Fest. And one of the ladies that I know there, she was talking to one of her friends. And one of the ladies, the first lady I talked to, I'm having her on my show, or she's going to come on my show, but we've kind of talked in the past as well. And those two started talking together with me. And all of a sudden, they both just stopped. And they started talking to each other like I no longer existed. And they kept talking about, I think he's a drop-in. Wait, this really makes sense. I think he's a drop-in. And they kept talking back and forth. And I'm standing there going, ladies, hey, what the heck is a drop-in? Someone explain this to me?
Fill me in.
And so they turned and they're like, we think you're a drop-in. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so to kind of understand how that happened, when I was younger, I'm prior military, and I did very bad things to very, very bad people. And what one of the ladies told me, she said, because of your past and because you had a hard time releasing all of that, your life was leading you to where you probably wouldn't have lived very much longer. And so Spirit felt it necessary to do a drop-in and to take out what was affecting you and basically harming you and probably could have ended your life and give you a new chance.
Wow.
And so they gave me a drop-in to what I have now.
So it's like a near-death experience without the near-death experience.
Correct. It's almost like they were telling me, we're just going to go ahead and do this to make sure you're safe in the future. So yeah, almost like just taking the battery out, put a new battery in. Here you go. So
yeah, it's almost like the way I felt it. I've had it happen a few times in my life. It's almost like you're on a certain timeline or a path.
Yeah.
And you're not on the right trajectory. And so that fractal of your soul kind of bounces out and another fractal comes in that puts you on a different timeline.
Well,
and
it's just, I have not had the personality switch that they talked about. Mm-hmm. I'm still just as ornery as ever. So that hasn't changed, but my mentality towards what I do and how I look at things has completely changed. Mm-hmm. I normally beforehand, everything was very, very structured and it was very aggressive. Mm-hmm. And now it's really not. Now I
kind of militant.
Right, exactly. And now I can step back and take everything in and kind of see which way I need to go with it and everything else. And I'm realizing, which is not happy for me, but it's supposed to be happy, is that I'm not always right like I thought I was.
It's Tom 2.0. It's like I felt like that too. It's like I remembered everything of my past, but I felt upgraded in a way. Right. It was like my consciousness was upgraded. I had received information that I didn't have previously. Yeah. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It was like that claircognizance where you just have this deep inner knowing. Yeah. That you know something. And I would have that. I still have that happen with clients. It's like something will come up and I'm like, I just know this. And they're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, I
do it all the time.
Yeah.
I have guests ask me questions on my show, or we'll talk about things. Like one of the guests, perfect example is one guest said, what do you know about the different colors of dragons in the Asian community? Mm-hmm. And my mind instantly knew, well, it's the same as what it is in the Norse gods and their dragons, and what it is for our Christian angels and their colors. Uh-huh. They all mean the exact same thing. It's just they're all in the different cultures. But our blue Archangel Michael is a protector. Mm-hmm. The blue Asian dragon is their protector. The Norse blue dragon is their protector. So the colors all match up in the different cultures. I never studied that before, but I knew it instantly. So I was able to talk about it. So I have the same thing that just gets fed into me. And it's funny because I always seem to hesitate for a second before I start talking about stuff I don't know. But a voice inside of me always tells me, start talking, you know what you're about to say. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start talking. And all of a sudden I'm done. And I'm like, wow, that really made sense. How did I do that? So
I have that too. It's like, because I'm quite a jokester most of the time, pretty sarcastic. But when my higher aspect of myself comes through, it's like, who is that? I mean, super serious, super straightforward. And I'm like, and I can kind of tell when I have that, because I do quantum healing hypnosis, and I had actually gone under hypnosis with one of my friends was going through her training, and she said, I want to hypnotize you. And I said, perfect. I had like 4 different personalities come through, and they were all so different. It went from like a joy, childlike spirit all the way to like some Arcturian, very serious, my higher self, my soul self. Yeah. And it was like, and I had recorded it, and it was really funny. It was like, and I started questioning, is this where multiple personality disorder comes from, or that bipolar, or what we categorize in the 3rd dimension? Is it really just different fractals or different aspects of ourself, that's coming through?
Yeah. And it's funny because I have been identified with 4 different starseeds. Uh-huh. And I've been told I need to reach out to an individual who someone's give me their name to say, you may have more. You're very, 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 very old. And I'm like, is it the gray beard? But apparently, and I've been told that I've even been told that by other entities. I've been told that by an earth elemental that I had to confront. Mm-hmm. He actually ran from me, and as he ran from me, he said, your essence is older than I am. Oh. And I'm afraid of you. So he actually ran, and I had to talk to him. So it was pretty interesting to have that conversation with an elemental who was afraid of me.
That's funny. And I personally believe, Tom, that we all have different aspects of all those origins. And
Right.
so when us as starseeds, it's like, we may kind of resonate with certain ones, but, before, okay, so like 3 years ago, I had a walk-in, and I felt before that I was really resonating with the Pleiadians. Well,
Right.
after that situation, now I resonate strongly with the Arcturians, but I still have that sense of knowing of the Pleiadians.
Right.
So it's like, I do feel like we have these aspects. It's just us in different frequencies and how we tune into it. And if we're ancient souls or ancient spirits and we're all connected to some extent, when we connect, we activate one another, in this knowledge and in this information. And so,
Definitely.
and I've talked about that, how to recognize when you receive downloads of information. And I do feel the more we connect, the more it's like what information you have and what I have, we kind of do a little energy swap there. It's
Right.
like, okay,
Right. Exactly.
our Akashic records kind of connect,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Somehow they connected at a point. And you're like, oh, all right, cool.
You're like, I know that. That's awesome. And I know I've had that experience where I've met someone before and it's like, I know you. Like, I know you more than I know you in this life. It's like, I know you in previous lives very deeply.
I will actually tell you about that. My first mentor I had never met her before in my life. And she was actually part of the investigation team that I was going to go with. And they were having a meeting on laptop like this. They were doing a Zoom session to talk about what they're going to bring and everything else. And I walked back behind the laptop and I looked at the lady and I stopped and I go, I know who you are. And she looks at me and I go, your name is Joni. I know who you are. I've met you before. And she goes, how do you know my name? And I go, because we have known each other for a long time. And she ended up being my first mentor. And she was like, I don't know how you did that, but that was amazing. Because we've never seen each other before in our lives. But we instantly had that connection like we were brother sister.
Yeah.
And she was like, that is crazy that you instantly know who I was. You recognize who I was. You even knew my name. And she was like, that was crazy. So
it is so crazy. And so I have a friend, I went out to this ranch and for the first time, and I met this guy. He actually looks very similar to you. He has the Norse kind of look with the beard. And immediately we connected eyes and we were like, weird. At first we didn't say anything. It was weird. And then we went about our day. And then he ended up coming up to me later saying, I don't know why, but for some reason, I feel like I just know you and I've known you and I've been in love with you and I've had these feelings and we've been connected brother, sister, and we've also been lovers and we've been this. And I'm just kind of standing there like, and at first he was looking at me like, oh man, she probably thinks I'm crazy. But the reality is I sensed it too. I sensed it. And that whole weekend, I connected with other people on that level too. It was like, did we all just kind of come together as a soul tribe or a soul family? Well, that guy, I said, I want to hypnotize you because he was also going through his quantum healing training. Well, we found out we have had lives as dragons. We've had lives as in the Viking times. We've had lives as we were actually enemies. We've been lovers. We've been brother, sister, family members, all these things. And it was really funny because we immediately felt that connection. And I get goosebumps when I feel that, when you feel that.
I tell people that if you don't have an understanding of what this is about and you just want to have a little glimpse of it, go and watch the movie What Dreams May Come.
Oh.
It's actually a Robin Williams movie.
Uh-huh.
And it's about when he loses his wife to suicide and he has to go find her in hell, basically. Mm-hmm. And they both agree that they end up living together, but they both move on to their next lives together, and they find each other as children in their next life, and they recognize who each other are. And so it's a movie called What Dreams May Come, and it's a fantastic movie. But for people who don't have the privilege of feeling what we feel, that's a great way for them to kind of experience it by watching a movie about it. It's really good. It's really good.
I got to check that movie out. I think I may have seen it many, many eons ago, but I got to check that out. And I do. I just see us like before we incarnate here on Earth, we're kind of like, okay, are you going to play the narcissist, or are you going to play the mom? Are you going to play the drunk dad? Or it's like we're kind of signing up for what we're going to act and what we're going to learn, through these lessons. And it's like, okay, I'm going to put you through this experience because you want to experience grief, or I'm going to put you through this because you want to experience love or, whatever. And
Right.
it's just really funny how we begin to wake up to this, and it's not just in this reality and in this life. And, and so it's like, I named this Finding the Magic in the Matrix, because many of us are going about our daily lives in our normal jobs, our mundane jobs, but then we realize that we have these abilities, and there's far more to what our reality is than what we actually see it to be, right? So it's like finding the magic in the day to day.
And that's really why my title of my show is because you're not taught this stuff in school. This isn't something you just come across in everyday conversation, and when you're sitting down and being taught by a teacher. This is stuff that happens outside that you actually just kind of stumble upon.
Exactly.
And kind of have to fumble it through with it on your own, unless you can find someone to help you. And so that's why the title is what it is why I designed it that way. But yeah, there's talking about the Matrix type stuff. It's weird because I can now look back and identify points where I have done things that my abilities had me do, but I did not know I had the abilities at that time.
Uh-huh.
I was in charge of our unit when we would go out and when we were on foot, and I would get these really weird feelings, and I'm like, all right, everyone, just cover, and we'd hide, because I was in charge of a group, but we were always on foot, so we'd hide. And sure enough, like a patrol would come by and they were like, how did you know that? I'm like, I have no clue. I just had that feeling that something was going to come. So we had to hide to stay protected.
Uh-huh.
And then I also started realizing that I have a small span of looking into the future. I would mention things that would happen on TV or just around, and they would happen like 5-10 seconds later. And people were like, how did you do that? I'm like, I have no clue.
And I personally feel this isn't our first rodeo in this timeline. It's like we've been here over and over, but now we're actually waking up in a different way in this timeline, and we're connecting in a way, and we are raising the frequency, of this planet, and we are, moving ourselves into a new higher vibrational timeline. And so it's like, I do feel like some of us, I get those premonitions from time to time. I've got a friend, I actually was talking to her before our show, and she's like, oh, I can't wait to watch your show, because she gets that. She's like, and it scares her. She'll have dreams about major pileup accidents on the expressway, or she had a dream about a tsunami or a wave or something. And she said she wakes up and it scares her, and then she sees it, happen, but she'll have really vivid dreams, and she knows when it's going to be real, because she says it's in color. She says, and when it's in color, she knows it's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's kind of how mine are, because in your dreams, you're not supposed to be able to see numbers or be able to read words.
Oh, okay.
Because that's not the side of your brain that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
The side of your brain that you can actually figure out numbers and words are your intellect side, not your artistic side. So it doesn't let you see those things.
Uh-huh.
But when I know that it's going to happen, it's because all of a sudden I can read the words and I can see the numbers.
Oh,
that triggers me that's something that's going to happen in my future, rather than just a dream.
Uh-huh.
So it lets me know that.
So I love how you tune into your body. Like you said, you can tell when it's in your head or across your chest, or if there's numbers in your, in your dreams. And so when you are, when you're communicating with these beings or elementals, how does that work? How are you perceiving that information from them?
Elementals are very interesting for me, because I see them, talk to them, and hear them just like I'm seeing, talking, and hearing you right now.
Mm-hmm.
I literally see them like they are a live being, like if I'm looking at an animal. So what's funny is one of the girls who I did an investigation with, one of her spirit guides is a fire elemental.
Cool.
But she cannot see it. She just knows what it is. And we were on the investigation, and I told her, I said, I can see your fire elemental, and he's talking to me. And she's like, what? So she was mad because I can communicate with her fire elemental better than she can. And she was like, this isn't fair. But I don't get a feeling like I do when I'm talking to spirit, or when I'm hearing spirit, like I do with elementals. Mm-hmm. Elementals to me is an everyday type thing. And you mentioned the Norse side of me, but I'm also Native American. I'm a very weird combination there. But I think I have a very strong Native American side as well. I know I do, and that's where the elementals come from. All the elementals originate basically from
Totally.
from the
When
Native
I was
American.
in Norway, there were trolls, everything. Yes.
So the fire, earth, air, and water elementals that we know here are really Native American ones, and they're really there to protect the earth and whatever else is assigned to the earth. That's really what they're made for, or what they're here for. And so they come to me and talk to me just like anything. Just like I said, just like you and I are having a conversation, anyone I have a conversation with, this is what it's like for me. And people are like, other people I know that can talk to them or hear them, they get symbols, or they get they kind of have to guess at what the elementals are saying. For me, it's just like having a conversation.
That's really cool. So do they show up in your home, or do you see them outside, or when do they show up?
I'll give you the example that I give kind of when I first give the example. My friend just moved into a new house, and she was overwhelmed by something in the house. She was very afraid by something in the basement. She knew it was in the basement. But she also had another spirit in the house. So I went to her house to go look at it. And I identified the person in the house, and he was just someone who liked the house because he used to live on a farm when he passed, and this is a farmhouse. Well, in the basement is basically in two different sections. One is all concrete, and then you go through a doorway with a brick wall, and the rest of it is dirt. And what happened is that it stirred up an earth elemental. The person who lived in it before it was a house flipper and basically destroyed the basement and left it in a shambles. So the earth elemental was very mad, and he's just so gregarious and overwhelming when you feel him that it was giving her anxiety, and she was afraid. And so I went down there to go confront him, and that he's the one who ran from me initially. And
because you saw him, he probably freaked out because he recognized you saw him.
Well, I looked at him and he started running, and he goes, "I'm afraid of you because your essence is older than me." and there was like 6 or 7 of us down in the basement, but I had them stop out in the concrete, and I went into that room by myself. And I was having a conversation with him, and he threw rocks at me, and they see these rocks come flying out of the room, and they're like, "What is that?" I go, "He just threw rocks at me. He's trying to get rid of me." And he goes, "Well, I'm stronger than you are." And I put my fingers into the dirt, and I go, "Feel my strength." And he went, "But there's more of me than there are of you." And I went, "No, there is one of you, and I am not afraid of you." And at that point, he basically decided it was best to compromise than to try to force me out. And so it came to an understanding, and I told him, "Look, I go, I do what you do. This is what you do. You're an elemental. You're supposed to be healing the ground. You're supposed to be healing the earth." I go, "But you're overwhelming the person that lives in this house, and you're scaring her." And so they had an agreement made to where, like, she planted flowers outside of the window of the basement, and she brings him offerings, like little flower offerings and stuff like that. And he is very much calmed down and started to protect the house. And so now, and she says, "It's great now." She goes, "You can still feel him, but it's not a scary feeling. It's a very warm feeling."
Yeah.
He's doing. So that was good that worked out. And then on that property as well, they have a handful of they have an underground water system they didn't know about. And I had to tell them that because that's where a couple of the water elementals were living. And I said, do you notice when you come to this area, it's about 10 degrees colder, regardless of what time of the year it is? And they're like, "Yeah." And I go, "You have an underground water system here." And they ended up having that checked out, and there was an underground water system there.
That's
like,
awesome.
I said, "Well, the water elementals told me about it." And they were like, "Oh, very cool." So yeah, it's just the little things that I get to do by having different abilities than everybody else. And that's something I did not know. Like I said, I'm very new at this. I'm still a year in, but I'm like, "Oh, well, I can see this and I can do this." And I just assumed all of us could.
Yeah.
And other people,
I think all of us can. It's just a matter of we tuned into that station or not to be able
but
to.
a lot of people are like, "No, I've never been able to do that." And I'm like, "But why can I?" And they're like, "We don't know." And I'm like, "Okay." So,
and I can hear, as a child, I remember I could see fairies, I could see elementals, but I shut that off, at some time. And now I'm beginning to open that back up again. And when I went to Sweden, Norway, Estonia. Gosh, I felt very in tune there. I felt very, like I could have those abilities. I was hearing them, I was feeling them, but I wasn't necessarily physically seeing them with my two, my two eyes. But now you've got me questioning. I do a lot of Sasquatch research here in North Idaho, and things will happen to us, and I start to question: is that Sasquatch or is that elementals that might be throwing rocks at us, or pine cones, or certain things?
Now, also know that there is another being in between the elemental and the human. It's a smaller being than the elementals. I always explain to people the elementals are like the Titans. And then you had like the demigods, and then you had humans. Well, these other beings in between the elementals and the humans is another form. They're like a lesser elemental, and they still do the same things, but they're the impish ones. They're the ones who like to cause all the problems and everything else, but they're doing it out of fun. They're more like fae.
Like the pugwudgies? Is that what they're called? Pugwudgies? Or
I actually haven't figured out the name of these yet. I know that there's a handful of places in the United States, actually all around the world, where there's all these mounds, these earth mounds, and they're there to protect the earth mounds, and they go out from those places and help do different things. But that's what they're there for, is to protect the earth mounds.
So my friend has a property with a mound on it. I tuned into the mound, and she has a lot of activity near this mound. And I thought maybe it was an Indian burial ground, but that's interesting.
That's what those are. Yep.
Oh, that's opening up a whole new world there. Because she lives right off of Hoodoo Mountain, which already has a lot of Native American heritage, a lot of curses on the land, a whole bunch of activity. But we get glyphs. They'll leave glyphs, like, different things. And so now I'm starting to question, is that, we were thinking it was Sasquatch, but it could be elementals as well. Now, there was a large structure that I wasn't a part of, but my two teammates went into the structure, and both of them got really, really sick. Well, when they connected with me, I felt an attachment. I had actually gotten an attachment from their energy, and I, am kind of experienced in cleansing my energy, but it took a while to get this off of me. So I'm wondering if that could have been those spirits, or those types of beings.
Could have been. Yeah, they're strong. They're not as strong as elementals, but they're still very strong, and they're very protective of their areas.
Interesting.
Yeah, when I see them and I talk to them, they it's a totally different language, but it's, for some reason, I understand it. And when I see them, they basically look like smaller versions with no faces. Like they're almost just like slick, no eyes, no mouth, but so everything is working is through telepathy when you're talking to them. But otherwise they have all the appendages and everything else, but they look very stumpy.
How tall are these beings? Like, how tall are the elementals? Are they little, or?
So the elementals themselves, like that one earth elemental I came across, was a monster. He was 14, 15, 16 feet.
Holy cow.
But he can shrink himself to fit into a small corner, because he's basically just buries himself into the ground and fits into an area. When the fire elemental that I saw that my friend carries, he took up an entire doorway, but he was very thin. To me, he looked more like Burning Man, like sticks of Burning Man. That's what he looked like. But he was tall, and he had the very long appendages. The wind elementals, they're not small, but they're not as big as they're probably 7-8 feet.
Gosh, I didn't think they'd be this big.
Oh, yeah, that's tall. Water elementals are actually the largest. And they're actually based off of what size of body of water they're in. Depends on their size. The other ones kind of come in a natural size. Earth elementals are monsters. Water elementals can get 3, 4, 5 stories high. They can be huge. And the other ones are just kind of, like I said, the fire elemental, but the air elemental is the hardest one to describe. Because it looks like a very wispy shape, but it looks like a very solid wispy shape. So it's kind of hard to describe. But they're pretty big too. They're about 6-7 feet as well.
Wow. So Tom, what other types of beings have you been able to communicate with or see other than say earthbound spirits and elementals? Have you had any galactic contact?
I don't know. I believe I have. but I'm not 100% sure. I found out that a lot of what I was doing is I can do a self-hypnosis and astral travel. So I've
That's like remote viewing.
They're kind of two different things. I can remote view and I can astral travel.
Okay.
A remote viewing is not as solid as my astral travel is. My remote viewing, I can basically take myself, like if I end up in a forest or something else, I can see where I'm at, I can see my surroundings, but I can't pull far enough back to identify specifically where I am.
Okay.
I get a smaller window. When I astral travel, my areas are monstrous. I've actually astral traveled through a location where one of the planets was all made out of diamonds. And I was actually floating through all the mountainous areas and everything else, so I could see all the diamonds glitter and everything else. And I've also astral traveled to where I'm out in space, and I have this huge, it looks like a square, floating comet, but there's like 4 or 5 of them. But on the top of them, there are fortresses, and you can see the movement inside the fortresses. And so I've seen those as well. So I know I've made contact, but I have not physically gone and talked to them in that realm. I've only seen them.
Yeah, because I've had an ET experience when I was in Western New York visiting my family. I was staying at my grandmother's old farmhouse. She had passed away, and I was there, and I was having communication from her, from many of the spirits on the land. But I had a full apparition of a mantis being show up, and just like you, when you first were awakened to your gifts, I was like, not even afraid. I was like, hey, what's up? You know, like most people would be like terrified, but I had gone downstairs to use the restroom. And when I walked out, it was standing there. It was probably about 9 feet tall. And it had a telepathic conversation with me, basically was telling me it's time for me to get on my path. It's time for me to step out, start taking action. And not much longer after that is when I started this podcast. And so I went upstairs and I had someone there with me, and he said, you know, you've been gone for a while. Like, what are you doing? Did you take a nap downstairs? And I'm like, no, I only went down to use the restroom and came back up. And he's like, you've been gone for a couple hours. And so I was in this time, this kind of time slip or time edit. But it was almost like I felt it was me. It was almost like that mantis being was me in another frequency telling me in this timeline what I need to be doing. I know that sounds very strange, but that's kind of what
it doesn't, because I am a nerd by trade. And I really follow the 10/11 different dimensional parallel or dimensional timelines. So I know that, you have 9 that are space, and you have 1 that is a time, and then you have 1 that is all encompassing. So I know how that travel works. So I know how you can cross yourself on those lines, meet a different version of yourself. So yes, it's very possible. That's exactly what you did.
It's so cool. And I had Jess and Barry Littleton on Monday on my show. We talked about the hologram, quantum hologram. And I felt as if that being was a hologram. It was almost like it had projected itself into my reality to have a conversation with me telepathically. And because I didn't really feel like I could touch it, like I could grab its hand or anything, but it felt almost like Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up in Star Wars. It's like, I could, like a spirit, I guess, when I've seen apparitions, you can put your hand through it, almost like it's transparent or translucent. That's the experience that I had with this mantis being. It wasn't like I could physically grab it or touch it, or at least I didn't try, but it didn't seem like I could.
Yeah, that's really been my only contact with anything as far as what I would consider extraterrestrial. I've come across other stuff when I've been on investigations, like portals and everything else and stuff like that, and how to deal with stuff like that, but really nothing extraterrestrial yet. But I believe I just don't remember. In all reality, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, and maybe by connecting with me now, you'll start seeing those, and now I'm going to start seeing elementals.
I've even made the offer. I've said out loud, look, I have fully believed that I am a starseed. You all will need to come talk to me. Come talk to me. Let me know what I need to do. Come take me up for a visit. Let me know what I'm missing out on. Whatever. Come on. And so far, it's been nah.
Well, a lot of it too is, when I first did that as well, I kept hearing in my mind, you need to raise your frequency more. You need to raise your frequency more. And I'm like, okay. And then it was just, then they appeared. And it wasn't like they appeared in my bedroom, standing there like a gray or anything. It was more, they had taken me to the ship in my sleep. And I had very significant experiences. I had one where I was standing in what appeared to be a sky rise, and it was all glass. And I had two friends behind me, and a ship had appeared in front of the glass, and there was a driver, and there was a whole circle of different types of beings, and they were all staring at me. And I was ecstatic that they made contact with me in this extremely lucid dream, which I know was a contact experience. And I was waving at them, and I was going crazy, and I'm turning around to my friends like, do you see them? And the one in the back started to kind of giggle because they knew that this was their way of communicating with me. So I would just, kind of let the listeners know, and you as well too, that oftentimes they'll come to you in the dream first, and then you get comfortable with them. Then they'll show up, like the mantis being showed up to me, that night. And that's the only physical contact that I've actually had, other than ships. I do a lot of the CE5 here, where we meditate and we call them in. But that I've had several dreams where they've taken me to the ships. So prepare for that, because that's an experience in itself.
I'm good with that. I'm kind of the whatever, you want to do what? Cool, let's go.
Yeah, and it's fun because I actually set an intention one night before I went to bed that I always joke, I actually had my friends one time, we all sat in gravity chairs and meditated to go to the spa on a ship, and that was the joke. I said, y'all can go check out how the ship works. I'm going to the spa because I wanted to go to the med beds. Well, one night I had set the intention that I wanted to go to the ship to go into a med bed. And 2 nights later, I actually had an extremely lucid, vivid dream of being healed in a med bed. And I woke up the next day and I felt like $1 million. So I think set an intention before you go to bed. And, if you keep doing it every night, it'll eventually happen.
Yeah. I'll probably drive them nuts enough. They're like, fine. They're like, hey.
They're like, no, you need this earthly experience. You're like, no. So, Tom, what advice do you have for those who are just waking up to their gifts? I mean, I know for you, it's I've been open to this on and off. I awaken and then I fall back asleep and then I awaken but now it's like I'm staying awake this time, but you've kind of really busted open over the last year. So what advice do you have for people who are also going through this?
The one thing I would tell people is that the number one thing I struggle with even now is I always want to know more. I feel like I'm frustrated because I feel like I can take on more and I want to do more and I want to learn more and I want to keep going. And I feel like I don't feel like I'm stuck. I just feel like I'm not sure what's next. And so what I do is I've actually, like I said, I think for anyone who's just coming into their abilities or just awakening, they're trying to figure it out, find a mentor. That's going to be important because that person has been there already. And a lot of the mentors don't have the same experience as you do, or the same experience that you're having for your awakening, but they know where to help you next. Because I guarantee my awakening was much different than yours was. It's going to be different than anyone else's was. And they understand that. And I would also tell them not to go to someone who considers himself an expert.
Yeah.
No one is an expert.
No.
My wonderful mentor still says she is a practicing shaman. She's a practicing this. She's a practicing that. Because she says you are always going to be learning. So expect that too. Not only just get a mentor, but expect that you're never gonna stop learning. It's just not gonna happen.
And that's the fun of it. I feel like it's like you just keep expanding your gifts even more.
It is. And for me, it was really weird because, like I said, okay, so I have the ability to be a psychic. I have the ability to mediumship. I can see elementals. We haven't talked about it, but you read about the energy bursting. I can tell people who's next to them on the other side of the world and tell them why they're there and what they're doing. And people are like, how can you do that? I'm like, I don't know how I can do it. And I think that's my most frustrating part still a year into it is, why do I know what I know? How do I know what I know? I know it's because I've lived all these past lives and everything else. And it's just me in this lifetime awakening to all of them. But why? How do I know it? What is this thing in my head that goes, yeah, you're right. Shh. Don't tell me I'm right.
Maybe that's the version of you before 49 that said, I don't want to know that I know until 49.
Right, exactly. But yeah,
it'll drive me crazy for 49 years.
Right, exactly. I'm like, now at least I'm on the downhill slide to my next one. I don't have to worry about it. I didn't have to learn when I was 13 like all these other kids and had to deal with it their whole lives. I'm like, I'm old enough not to care anymore. What do you want to do?
You had to experience your military experience. You had to go through all of that. And I'm sure as a soul, you signed up for all of those experiences.
Oh, I'm sure. But no, it to me, it really is getting the mentor and just accepting the fact that you're never going to stop learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I totally agree with that. And find other people who are going through it too on your same level. I think that's always fun as well to, I've worked with some of my friends. I'm like, let's practice telepathy. Let's practice telekinesis. Let's practice some of these gifts. And I do feel that when you do it together, it enhances it and it makes it stronger.
Well, I will tell everyone out there, listen to me out there. I'm not that person. Don't come to that. I am the laziest person you will ever meet. I don't meditate. I don't practice. It just all comes to me. People are amazed that I'm able to do as much stuff without ever practicing. I don't take the time. I don't need 5-10 minutes to open up so I can hear and see spirit. And I don't need 5 to 10 minutes afterwards. I open and I close just like that. I see stuff. I don't see stuff. It's very rapid. And there are so many people who have told me, well, you need to meditate to keep growing. You need to meditate to keep growing. And finally, I had 2 people that I trust wholeheartedly said, why? Are you still getting the information? Are you still learning? Is it still coming to you? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, then you don't need to meditate.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Just let it happen. Just be open to it. They said, if you feel better about meditating, then meditate because it will calm you. It will center you. And meditation has a great place in what we do. It really does. But not for everybody.
No, I 100% agree on that because I feel like there was a time when I meditated often and now I do what's called resonant tuning. I just tune to certain tones and then boom, I have an experience. And so I think it's all training wheels, the way I look at it. It's all training wheels, every single bit of it.
I mean, I'll do what people say is meditation, but really what I do is zone out. And
that's just getting into theta state. That's really all you're doing.
Yeah, and I just, especially when I'm on my way to work, because my work drive is like a 10-minute drive. And I'll tell you what, this thing really empty between here and there. It just goes all quiet, and I'm just like, boo-doo-doo. So,
mine does that in the shower. I get more downloads of information in the shower. I'm like, I need to put a recorder in here or something because the amount of information I get in the shower is insane.
Right? But yeah.
That's awesome. So let's talk about energy bursting. What is energy bursting?
Energy bursting is something I learned I could do to help push healing or energy to somebody. And I can do it over miles. It's not something that I have to do with someone in the room. When I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook and they're in the same area we are, or as far as paranormal or psychic or whatever else, and they're like, hey, something's going on. Can you please send prayers and healing? Well, when they say, please send prayers and healing, I am literally sending healing to them. And it comes from my palms. I am not an energy vampire in any way, shape, or form, but elementals will share their energy with me. I have realized this, and that comes from the elementals because they heal. And that's what I'm doing. I'm healing. So I can actually focus on whatever person they're asking for, and I can push them through my palms, and I can feel energy go out.
Do you need a picture or do you just visualize them? Or
visualize it in my head, and it really looks like little pulses And they're two different colors of light. Healing is green that come out of my palms, and they look like little, for all the techie nerds, they look like the little photons that shoot out from Star Trek. And that's what it looks like comes out of my palms, and they will travel to where they need to go and embed themselves into that person's body and help with healing. If they need energy, I can push energy, and energy for me is gold. Energy out of me is gold. The energy is different. The energy actually looks like little mini tornadoes, like they're actually stretching out to go to you and to fill you with energy. And I've been able to do that ever since I learned I can do it almost a year ago.
Really?
I also have the weird, I can do it very close, and it's not just an energy burst. It's very, for anyone who's seen The Green Mile, it's the what I call the John Coffey. I can put you into a hug, and I can hold you. And with the intent of what's going on, if you're sad, if you're tired, if you're sick, if whatever, if your anxiety is up, I can hold you, and I can just hold you, and I will feel your body drop once, and I wait. And then I will feel it drop a second time, and I know I've taken in what is wrong with you, and I've given you what you need, and I'll let go. And I've had so many people go, "What just happened?" And they're like, "How did you do that?" And so it's pretty cool because I can do it up close with the hugs as well. And for me, it doesn't stay with me; it just releases. So it never hurts me, but it takes out the problem that had. For instance, I'll give you an example. Someone had a friend that passed away, and she was crying uncontrollably. She just could not stop sobbing. And I knew she was hurting. And I said, "Do you want me to take that from you?" I go, "Not the pain, but," and she said, "Yes." So I gave her a hug. And all of a sudden she slowed down, her breathing slowed down, and I waited, and she dropped her shoulders once, I can feel it. And then the second time, and she went, and I let go. And we didn't say a word. And then like an hour later, she goes, "What did you do?" And I go, what do you mean, what did I do? She goes, "I can't cry." She goes, I can be sad, but I can't cry. She goes, "This is amazing. I've never had this happen to me before." She goes, "Thank you for doing that." She goes, I still feel the pain, but not as much, but I can't cry.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And she talks about that. She tells that story all the time.
That's awesome. And I did a show on the different types of frequency holders, and the transmuter is one of them. And that's what it sounds like you're doing, is you're transmuting energy. And I do that I don't have to hug someone to do it. I can be standing next to someone at the grocery store and I'm like, "Oh, I got a pain in my side that wasn't there." And I immediately can kind of sit with it, and I can transmute that energy.
When I work with other people, they have a hard time working with me because I have a very, very, very high vibration, apparently. And I interfere with them. And they're like, "Oh my God, you're giving me a headache. I can't focus because you're so strong." And I'm like, "I don't know that I'm doing that. I'm sorry. I apologize." So I have been given different crystals to carry with me to help mute it to me and not affect the outside.
That's awesome. And so that brings something that came to me in my QHHT session with someone or myself, was that I can take crystals and set intentions in them. And I used to create wands for people in past lives. And I was reading that you can do that as well.
I can. I don't know what it is. I never wear crystal. I never wear anything ever. I wear a copper Norse bracelet that has 2 trees of life on it on my right wrist. That's all I wear. But every once in a while, and I have tons and tons and tons and tons. I probably have over 2,000 crystals in my house. Some of them are bracelets, some of them are just loose crystals, whatever else. Every once in a while, I'll get the notion that I need to grab 2 or 3 of them and take them to work with me. And sure enough, once I'm at work, someone will come to me and start talking to me, and I'm like, "Hold on a second," and I'll pull it out and I'll hold it and I hand it off to them. I go, "Give me this back in 15 minutes. And they'll come back and they're like, "What did you do to me?" And I'm like, "Are you better?" They're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Not hungover anymore, are you?" They're like, "No." And I'm like, "There you go." So yeah, it's interesting because I have that same ability. I don't feel the crystals work for me. I feel I work for the crystals.
Uh-huh.
That's the best way to describe it, because I can give an intent to any crystal and make it work for somebody, regardless of what they need. And I've always been able to do that. When I investigated with the team, I would always be the charger of the golden healers, and they would take them and it would give them all their energy back.
Uh-huh.
Or they would just hug me after, if they had to go under, because they were the ones that were channeling whatever else. They'd come out of it and they were exhausted. And they just come up to me and give me a hug, and I just hold them, and all of a sudden, like, okay, we can go again now. And I'm like, all right, we're good. Or I can do it with the crystals.
You're like a human organite.
Right, right. And it was really weird because I never understood. Apparently I've been doing that my whole life. High school, college, all that stuff. I've always been a hugger, and I never realized why. But everyone always says, "Man, you get the best hugs." Well, now I know why, because it actually triggers something.
That's awesome, because I'm the opposite. I've always been a non-hugger, but I can heal people from a distance. They can be 3 feet away from me and I can do it. I don't necessarily have to do the hugging. I'm actually like, don't hug me. I'm good. I'm in my energy. It's kind of funny how we find out what our gifts are.
And it's funny because I am one of those that everyone tells you, to protect yourself, you have to have a bubble, or you have to do this, that. I literally have I call it a golden scale armor. I call it my superhero outfit that sits right up on me like my clothes. It's that close, because I want whatever spirit, entity, alien, whatever it is, to be able to get this close to me. And I know I'm perfectly safe, but I want it to be allowed to do that so I can get the most close-up experience I can with it, knowing that I'm still safe.
And then it's not going to attach to you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I've never had an attachment unless I forced it to. We had someone who went under without wanting to go under, and she got jumped.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time frame, it threatened all of us. And then it turned and looked at me and said, "But I want you."
Oh.
And I went, "Okay." So I put my arm on her and I go, "Come on in." And I felt it leave her and start to go up my arm, and it got to my shoulder, and I locked it off at my shoulder. I have the ability to shut down where I want to. So I have this thing on my arm, and she comes out of it, and she's like, "What's going on?" I go, "Hold on, I'll be right with you. I have to go get rid of this thing." So I went outside and put it into the ground and released it out of my arm, and it was mad because it couldn't continue in to my body. I actually shut it off of my shoulder. People are like, "How did you know to do that?" I go, "I have no clue."
I just knew.
I just knew it. I just knew how to do it, and I knew what to do about it, and I knew how to fix her. And they were like, "How?" And I go, "I don't know. People, it's 3 words and I still don't know."
So when you went through this experience a year ago, what did your family think? Like, what did your friends and family, like, were they like, "Who are you? What's going on?"
Well, I will tell you that my family, there's not too many left alive, so we're really not that close. We're not that much contact. But I waited for a couple of months before I brought it up at work and with friends. And it was interesting because the only way I brought it up was because for some reason, someone would come and talk to me about something. And they've never talked to me about something before. And they're like, "For some reason, I feel like I'm supposed to talk to you about this." And it was personal stuff. And I was like, "Oh, I can help you." And they were like, "How?" And I told them, "This is what I'm able to do." So it's almost like it was an introduction because they needed my help without knowing I was the one they needed the help from.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of how it came about at work, or out just to the public and to friends and everything else. And I would say 99% of them are pretty supportive. I'm married, and my wife's family is pretty supportive of it. They question it sometimes, but they don't look down upon it. They have different beliefs or different whatever, and that's fine. But they're curious, and they started to ask more questions because they're realizing that some stuff happens. And like, "How did that just happen?"
We can't explain that.
Yeah, and they're like, I don't get how that just happened." I can tell them what their auras were, and that came out of nowhere. What their colors were. Just one day, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to 2 people. In fact, I'm talking to 2 people that I'm going to have on my show on Monday. I'm sitting there watching them. All of a sudden, I go, "I can see your auras." And they're like, "What?" And I go, "I can see what color your aura is." And they were like, "How long have you been able to do that?" I go, "Right now." And they went,
Yay!
"Oh." And they went, "What's our auras?" And I told them, and they both went, "He's right." So I was like, "Guess I can read auras now."
That's the funny thing is when it happens, it's like you just wake up one day and you're like, how, like for me, when I started to speak light language, it was about a year and a half ago. I just woke up one day and all these languages were coming out of my mouth. And I started to work with clients and I'm like, okay, I don't really care if you know what light language is. I just want you to close your eyes and I want you to feel this energy coming through. And my tongue, my mouth, I'm coming out with tones. I don't even know what's happening. And so
Right.
now I just let it flow, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird because when I went on one, I talked about the portal and I saw the portal in a painting and I went to put my hand against the painting because I tell people I'm too dumb to know any better because I have no fear of anything.
Yeah.
So
You got that golden armor on.
I just went to put my hand on the portal to see what it did, and it rejected me. It pushed me away. It was like two magnets pushing against each other. It would not let me put my hand against it because I think it knew that I could close it. Because another person that was with me went to put her hand into it, and it tried to pull her in, so we had to pull her out.
Ooh.
And so I think it realized that's not the person we want to play with, and it's a blessing and kind of a curse because there's sometimes when I go into locations and I don't have that fear factor, that sometimes stuff won't come out because they're like, we can't make him afraid, or we can't intimidate him, or we can't do this, we can't.
Yeah, because they use that energy to get stronger,
right.
you know?
Right. And I don't have that. I'm the one who walks in and just opens the doors and goes, what's this? What's this? They're like, don't open that door. And I'm like, too late. And they're like, oh. And and I'm that person. I don't have that fear. And sometimes I feel bad when I go on investigations because they won't come out. So I try to do like a 2 or 3 day investigation so they get to know me overnight. And then a lot of times during the second and third times they'll come out.
Yeah.
And I've realized for some reason a lot of entities that won't let people into certain locations, like they're like, okay, this is my machine room, you can't come in here. I am actually one who's allowed in. It's really weird because I'm allowed to go into a lot of places where they say the entities will scratch you or they will throw stuff at you or anything else. When I come in, they're inviting me and they're asking, and they actually end up talking to me. So I don't know what that connection is with most people or most spirit like that, but once they realize I'm not a threat to them and I'm just trying to hear their story, and I can decipher what it's supposed to be correctly, then they're very welcoming to me and they want me to come in and talk. And they know that I'm doing it very respectfully, which is kind of cool.
That is awesome because I've had that experience too with earthbound spirits. I think they recognize that I'm open to hearing them and hearing their story and assisting them to the light. You know, oftentimes they just want to be heard and then they want to be guided to the light. And so are there any archangels that you feel strongly connected to?
I know that I'm connected to Archangel Michael. So many people say the same thing, but
I was sensing that on you big time. I was curious if that was the one you were going to say.
Well, there are so many experiences when I astral travel that during my astral travel, right before I wake up, there will be a blue arc that comes through wherever I'm at. It's almost like he's slicing into the sky for me to let me know that he's with me. And because he is the warrior, he's the protector, everything else, and that's what I've done my entire career, my entire life. In this life, has been a protector of others and everything else. And I've even been told by another person that my Arcturian side stands at her side because she is one of the princesses, and I am her personal guardian. So that's who I am. So that's what I'm bred for, is to protect.
That's awesome.
So that's why I'm so tied to Archangel Michael. It's because of that warrior spirit.
And it's funny because my friend who looks very similar to you, the Norse, it's Michael all day long. And he talks about that. And I immediately felt that connection too. And I'm kind of feeling Raphael on you as well, a little bit, the healer.
Yes. When I went to go see Reiki, my Reiki person, she's like, she goes, this is so weird. She goes, you have 3 very dominant colors. She goes, you have a gold, you have a blue, and she goes, and you have a green. She goes, you're really supposed to be a healer with your protective side. She goes, you heal naturally when you're around people. She goes, people are drawn to you and you heal them naturally just by being around you. And I'm like, okay. And I've never thought of myself like that. I've always thought of myself as very introverted, standoffish, that hermit type person.
Yeah.
But but I also am a very good chameleon that I can blend in with any environment I'm in. I can talk to anybody, I can socialize, I can talk about any subject when it comes up. And I'm very, I just have a rapport with people that seems to be, to me, is very natural, and to them seems very natural, but to me feels very unnatural. Like, I'm like, why am I able to do this? And why does it feel like I'm supposed to, knowing that I'm an introvert?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
What's your zodiac sign? What's your element?
I am a Pisces.
Oh, so water. Okay.
Yeah, which is funny because everything I read about my sun sign, Pisces, is completely wrong.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely completely wrong. I haven't done a deep dive into everything, but I know that my moon sign is more similar to what I am. I don't remember what it is, but when I read it and everything else, I know that I'm similar to some of my other signs than I am to my Pisces sun sign.
Yeah, and Pisces is one of the most intuitive,
Yeah.
since I'm a Pisces Aries cusp. I'm right at the beginning of Aries, the end of Pisces. So yeah.
And I'm also born on leap year. I'm born on leap day.
Interesting.
So yeah,
You're a natural time traveler.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have been told by numerous people, because they said, what are you? What is your greatest strength? Because they're like, well, I can do all these other things, but I call myself a psychic. And I'm like, I don't know, because I feel like all of my abilities and all my talents are equally strong. I don't feel like I'm stronger than one than the other. They said, then you need to call yourself an intuitive, because they're using all of them equally. And you can use them rapid fire together to put stuff together. They said, so you're going to be an intuitive. And I'm like, okay, that's a good word for it, because I don't know what else to do with it.
Yeah, and that's why I named the show, versus saying awakening to your psychic abilities, I named it intuitive abilities, because I feel like intuitive kind of encompasses all of them.
Right. And that's what I'm told to
they're also different
as, because I work with so many different elements of the different parts. And I don't feel like I'm stronger in one than the other. When a new one comes in, it automatically is just as strong as my other ones are. I don't have to work at building it. It's as strong as the other ones are. And I'm trying to like I said, I don't know why.
Do you feel that your Norse heritage has anything to do with the fact that you can work with the elementals?
I think my elemental side actually comes from my Native American side.
Oh, okay.
I think my Norse side,
warrior.
I think it works also with the same thing, but having the Norse Native American combo, that's a lot to deal with. I mean, that's quite a lot of history and lore that you have to decipher through. And if we have time, I'll tell you really quickly that
I'd love to. Yeah.
I had a shaman tell me, she goes, I had a dream about you, and I want to tell you what I saw in my vision. I said, okay. She said, you're Native American. I go, yes, I am. I'm Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Cheyenne Indian. I have 4 different types in me. And she said, I had this dream that I was surrounded by all the chiefs of all the different tribes of all of man. So all the different branches of all the tribes sat around in a circle, and they were all the chiefs. And a shaman had a bowl in his hand. And he would walk to the first chief and go, what is your best aspect of your best warrior? And the chief would tell him, and he'd take that and he'd put it in the bowl. And he said he went down the circle and did that to all the chiefs. Once he got the last one in there, he closed the lid, he mixed it, and then he poured it into me. And I was like, that's a lot to take on.
That's awesome.
So I was like, that's kind of overwhelming to hear that when a shaman tells you that. And I was like, that's a lot of pressure to live up to.
And maybe that's why you had to be a little older, a little more wiser to be able to take on that consciousness,
Yeah, that perhaps, but that was that's probably the coolest thing that's been ever told to me about that. A lot of people talk about my North side. They believe that I've been told that they think I'm a branch off of one of the gods, and that's why people draw to me, is because I'm a branch off of the gods, and people respect the gods, so they come to me for questions or for help. And I don't know what it is, but it naturally, people do come to me for help. Kids, oh my goodness, it is so funny. I'll be walking in the store and a kid will just stop and look at me, and they'll wave and they'll smile out of nowhere.
I've had that happen too, Tom. And I had a little kid. I was at the farmer's market. ran from his mom and hugged my leg and was like
Yeah.
staring up at me, giggling. And I'm like, what is happening right
They do it
now?
to me all
I
the
just want to
time.
see what they see.
Yeah, they do it to me all the time. If I'm with my wife and with friends, they're like, "What is it with you and kids?" I go, "I don't know. I don't know what they see in me, but they see some kind of purity in me that I definitely don't see in myself."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I feel that way too. It's like, just my friend and I were sitting in a park and this little kid kept staring at us and staring at us. He would not move his gaze. And I'm like, oh, God, just to know what that little kid, he probably was 2 or 3, just to know what he could see. If he's seeing auras, if he's seeing, elementals around us, but he could not stop staring at us.
Yeah, it's funny because I travel for work, and I've always had the beard, but I also used to have a mohawk. And so I was quite.
That's your Native American side right there.
It really is. But it was funny because I would walk through, and like I said, kids would stop and stare at me. And there was so many times that kids stopped and stared at me, but the follow-up to that was the parent would look at me and go, "Nope, nope, nope," and like push the kid away from me. "No, don't stop looking at that guy." And I'm like, "What?"
Your 3D avatar doesn't look the same as your higher frequency self.
I was like,
really
"Yeah,
funny.
scary to them, but I like really nice to the kids." So
Oh, that's funny. Well, Tom, this has been such a fun conversation. And oh my gosh, I know we could go so much longer, but tell us one more time where people can find you, where they can check out your YouTube channel.
Okay, well, I am at youtube.com/@stuffIneverlearned. That's actually my brand new site. I used to have all that ugly, wonderful letters and numbers, blah, blah, blah. But now it is @stuffIneverlearned.
Okay.
And my show runs Monday nights, 7 p.m. Central.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, it's just nice to be able to talk to someone who has, I haven't had all the experiences you've had, but I've had a few of them. And it's just nice to be able to communicate with someone who is also experiencing things outside of our normal daily lives.
Well, you know that now that I've been on here, you're gonna have to flip out and you have to come onto my show now too.
100%. I'll tell you about all my crazy stories working in organ donation, all the walk-in spirits I saw. I have a lot of topics. I worked in funeral homes. I worked in the morgue. Yeah, I've got a lot of stories.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you very much. Night, everybody.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.